because this is a lot of the personal footage of Diddy. It shocked a lot of people. And I know, 50, the way you run, this cannot be all that you have. Is there other stuff that you just have not shown? Yeah. So are you coming out? I know next year is going to be a number 2, season 2.
I just put it on YouTube.
I just put it on YouTube.
The video opens by challenging what viewers think they already know. From the very first moment, the narrator makes it clear that what the audience saw in Season 1 was not the full story, not even close. The success of the documentary didn't just expose uncomfortable truths, it created a much bigger question that refused to go away. If that series really showed everything, why did it feel unfinished? Why did so many threads seem intentionally left hanging? The narrator frames this as more than a creative decision. It's positioned as a warning sign. Something was too big, too sensitive, or too risky to fully address the first time around. The tone immediately suggests that Season 2 isn't just a continuation, but a confrontation. The narrator hints that Netflix may have opened a door it can't easily close, and that the real story has been waiting in the shadows. One name, barely spoken in the first season, now sits at the center of everything. And once that name enters the conversation, the entire narrative shifts from shocking to unsettling. The narrator plants the idea that this next chapter won't just revisit power, fame, or control, but the cost of them. And as the introduction closes, viewers are left with a single thought lingering in their minds. If Season 1 was already explosive, what was so dangerous it had to be saved for later? As the video continues, the narrator breaks down why so many viewers walked away from Season 1 with a strange sense of unease. Not because what was shown wasn't disturbing enough, but because it felt carefully contained. The allegations, testimonies, and behind-the-scenes stories painted a picture of an empire built on silence and fear. Yet there were gaps that stood out the more people rewatched it. Certain timelines felt rushed, certain relationships were referenced but never explored, and most noticeably, one deeply personal chapter of Diddy's life was almost entirely absent. The narrator explains that audiences are sharper than networks often assume. When something is missing, people feel it instinctively. Online discussions didn't focus on what was revealed, but on what wasn't. Fans began asking whether the omissions were about storytelling or self-preservation. The narrator frames this as the moment the documentary stopped being just a series and became an ongoing investigation in the court of public opinion. The silence surrounding specific events didn't calm speculation, it multiplied it. And as viewers dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Everything that had been cut, shortened, or avoided pointed toward a single, unresolved story. The narrator makes it clear that Season 1 didn't fail to include it by accident. It avoided it because once that door is opened, there's no way to control what comes out next. At this point, the narrator shifts focus to 50 Cent, not as a rapper or internet provocateur, but as a calculated producer who understands narrative power better than most. The video explains that while the public often sees his posts as jokes or trolling, history shows a consistent pattern. He documents first, jokes later. The narrator highlights how 50 has repeatedly used humor as a shield, while quietly positioning himself 3 steps ahead of everyone else. In this case, his involvement goes far beyond commentary. He isn't reacting to the story, he's shaping it. The narrator explains that every vague post, every cryptic caption, and every casual remark acts like a pressure valve, releasing just enough information to keep the public engaged without revealing the full hand. This isn't chaos, it's pacing. The narrator emphasizes that 50 understands attention cycles and knows how to stretch them. By confirming Season 2 without revealing its contents, he forces speculation to do the work for him. The audience becomes invested before a single frame is released. And when someone with his reputation hints that things are about to get darker, people listen. The narrator closes this section by making one thing clear. If 50 is still talking, it's because the story is far from over. The narrator then introduces the element that raises the stakes beyond entertainment, the existence of an enormous archive of unreleased footage. According to what's been publicly suggested, this material wasn't captured by outsiders or investigators. It was self-recorded. Conversations, meetings, moments intended to stay private, all preserved under the assumption that control would never be lost. The narrator explains how this changes everything. When someone documents their own narrative, they assume they'll also control how it's edited and understood. But once that control slips, the footage becomes something else entirely. The narrator stresses that only fragments of this material were used in Season 1, carefully selected and tightly edited. The rest remains unseen, and that's what unsettles people. Because raw footage doesn't rely on interpretation, it speaks for itself. The narrator avoids making direct claims, instead focusing on why the mere existence of this archive makes Season 2 so unpredictable. It's not about what's proven, it's about what can no longer be explained away. As this section ends, the narrator makes it clear that the real danger isn't what has been said publicly, but what's still sitting quietly off camera. This is where the tone of the video shifts. The narrator introduces Kim Porter, not as a rumor or a headline, but as a presence that shaped Diddy's private world for years. Model, actress, mother, and longtime partner, her role in his life wasn't peripheral, it was central. Yet her story was barely acknowledged in Season 1. The narrator explains why that absence matters. Kim wasn't just part of the background, she was a witness to the version of Diddy the public rarely saw. The video emphasizes that when someone this close to power is removed from the narrative, questions naturally follow. The narrator carefully explains that while her passing was officially attributed to illness, the lack of detailed public answers created a vacuum that speculation rushed to fill. No accusations are made, but the emotional weight is undeniable. Friends, former partners, and fans all expressed confusion, disbelief, and lingering doubt. The narrator frames this not as a mystery to be solved, but as a story that was never allowed to be told. And that silence, intentional or not, became louder than any allegation ever could. The narrator then explains why focusing on Kim Porter fundamentally changes the nature of the documentary. Season 1 exposed systems of power. Season 2, if it goes where people believe it will, exposes consequences. This isn't about contracts or careers anymore. It's about human cost. The narrator explains that once a documentary moves into personal loss, the stakes are no longer just reputational. They become emotional.
Because of all the videotapes, because of the book, because of all the people she gave copies of her book to, or at least chapters, because of everything that she had on him.
Media takeout reports that producers
Unnatural cause.
And then all of a sudden, they rush to do the coroner come in and say, yo, she had a back, she had pneumonia, she died of pneumonia, but nobody did no autopsy or nothing like that. Get out of here.
She was 47 years old. But from the moment
Organizing everything. Allegedly, they are saying that he is on video, film, tampering with witnesses, giving out addresses, offering money, bribing, we'll pay for your lawyers, all kind of shit that could be counted as witness tampering, obstruction of justice. And 50 of all people has his hands on this footage. And I'm hearing that this could implicate Diddy's lawyers in some bullshit they could be charged. This shit is getting wild.
Diddy may have been connected to Tupac Shakur's murder, reignited a decades-old firestorm.
50 got y'all thinking that Puff is the man behind Pac getting at the Quad Studios thing? I see a lot of y'all saying, well, Puff was at Quad when Pac got blanked, so nothing. I was covering Pac's trial. I was seeing him every single day through that situation when that Quad situation happened.
For years, whispers about a
No,
Diddy
I
Crips
will never defend Puff, but I will defend the truth. I see a lot of y'all saying, well, Puff was at Quad when Pac got blanked, so nothing. I was covering Pac's trial. I was seeing him every single day through that situation when that Quad situation happened. Yes, Big and Puff were there because it's a studio. There's lots of people recording.
discussions and behavior that could devastate any remaining defense Diddy has left.
But, just as not guilty. Like, I want to have a life to be able to live. It's really going to be hard for me to take more hits than I take it.
But you didn't do anything wrong on any front, and you've come to New York to face things head on. If anyone's ever paying any attention to what you've actually been doing, you've handled this.
Emotional, legal, and cultural. This is where networks hesitate. Not because the story lacks interest, but because it's impossible to control how it will land. The narrator suggests that this is why her story was delayed, not forgotten. With public pressure mounting and scrutiny intensifying, what was once too risky may now be unavoidable. The video frames Season 2 as a breaking point. Either the story stays contained, or it expands into territory no one can walk back from. And as the narrator hints, once that happens, the conversation will never be about entertainment again. As the video approaches its conclusion, the narrator lays out the dilemma facing Netflix. On one side, massive viewership, cultural relevance, and a story the public refuses to let go of. On the other, legal risk, industry relationships, and the fear of opening doors that can't be closed. The narrator explains that streaming platforms are driven by numbers, but constrained by consequences. If Season 2 is released in full, it could redefine the documentary entirely. If it's delayed or softened, it may confirm everything viewers already suspect. The narrator frames this as a no-win situation. Either way, the reckoning continues. Silence will be interpreted as guilt. Release will be interpreted as confirmation. And that's why the tension feels so heavy. In the final moments, the narrator returns to Kim Porter, grounding the entire story in her legacy rather than speculation. The video reminds viewers that behind every headline is a real person, and behind every empire are lives shaped by it. The reckoning isn't about destroying reputations, it's about confronting truth, however uncomfortable it may be. The narrator emphasizes that Season 2, if it happens, won't just expose power, it will force accountability, and that's why this story refuses to disappear. As the video ends, viewers are left with a final question that lingers long after the screen fades. When the truth is this heavy, who really decides whether it gets told?